The Apartment Rental. August 1997. Vaclav stood at the payphone booth with the stench of the ongoing city garbage strike in his nostrils. Back in Brno, his girlfriend Susanna was crying again. 3 days in a row now. She asked him why they argued so much. Vaclav didn't have anything to say. More than ever, he wondered if perhaps they should have ended things before he left. She hung up. He had to find an apartment. He'd been living in the youth hostel on Granville Street for 4 days already, and he was tired of drunken Aussies and French-Canadian hippies. Graduate school started in less than a week, and he had to have some peace and quiet. He was running out of clean clothes. It had only been 1 month ago that his native Czech Republic had been invited to join NATO. Talks of EU membership were in the air. Coming 6 long years after the Velvet Revolution, led by Vaclav's more famous namesake, President Havel, that rogue playwright turned statesman, many of Vaclav's fellow students felt this to be the sign that their country would finally be part of the West. Vaclav wasn't so sure. Coming to North America had seemed a better option for him, so now here he was, in Vancouver. Clean city, beautiful scenery, but hot and fetid this week. The garbage strike, which the owner of the hostel told him was in its 3rd week, made things worse. A trolley bus clattered past him, the electrodes sparking at the wire junction. Vaclav caught a whiff of the resulting smoke over the stink of trash in the late summer air. He opened up the broadsheet classifieds. That morning in the hostel lobby, Vaclav had circled several promising leads. He still didn't know what was close to the university and what wasn't, but his primary concern was price and cleanliness. He dropped a quarter in the slot and dialed his first highlighted number. Already rented. He tried another. You've reached McClellan Property Management. Please leave your name and number, and we will call you back as soon as possible. Have a creative day. This was not good. He wished he'd lined up something before leaving the Czech Republic. But that wouldn't have been spontaneous. It wouldn't have been adventurous. 2 adjectives that often came up when he argued with Susanna about the direction their lives were, or more to the point, weren't, taking. Vaclav juggled the remaining quarters in his hand, the clinking sounds dull in the echoless phone booth. He dialed another number. Busy. Without a doubt, the fates were lining up against him. Maybe today was the wrong day. Back at home, he'd had a kid's comic book version of the I Ching, a sort of inside joke from his undergraduate thesis advisor in Prague that maybe could have shed some light on his dilemma. But the book was halfway around the world. Vaclav contemplated spending the day at the beach with a bottle of brandy and a paperback, something he was sure every Vancouverite did in the summer, even though such an enterprise would be out of his rapidly shrinking budget. The payphone rang. Vaclav looked around. Was someone watching him? People passed by, paying him no mind. The phone kept on ringing. He picked up the receiver. A silence. "Hello?" said the voice on the other end. "Hello?" said Vaclav cautiously. "You calling about the apartment?" The voice was deep, mellifluous. Vaclav looked around again. "Yes, how did you—" "Call display," said the voice. It was smoky. "I'm with McClellan. I manage their properties." "Oh." Vaclav composed himself. "Yes, I'm looking for an apartment." "Bachelor, 1 bedroom, what?" There was a languid, rolling tinge to the voice, an accent that Vaclav, despite his proficiency in English, had trouble placing. The manager continued. "I can find you something, for sure. What are you looking for?" "I want a quiet one-bedroom," said Vaclav. He hadn't spoke much of his second language on the phone before, and he worried that something would get lost if he wasn't careful.
"Doesn't everyone? Don't fret, my friend. We'll sort you out. Tell me more,"
said the voice. It seemed to get deeper as the conversation went on. "Near the university, please, and around $500. There was a deep nasal breathing at the other end, and Vaclav heard the speaker open and close his lips.
"You're asking a lot, but I'm sure there's something that we have available. Something that'll tickle your fancy, as they say."
"Great," said Vaclav, who couldn't believe how quickly the fate of the day had changed. "What, do I have to do to see the apartment?"
"Okay, listen closely," said the voice. "We haven't got you a specific apartment just yet, so keep cool, my friend. But if you come down to the office, look at some pictures, some computer databases, that sort of rudimentary business, then we can narrow down the field."
The words were coming out of a cavernous black closet smothered in velvet. "Where is your office, please?" The speaker recited an address that Vaclav scribbled down in the margin of his newspaper. "I will be there as soon as possible."
"I'm not going anywhere,"
said the voice. Vaclav hung up. He stood in the phone booth, beaming. Just then, he placed the accent, the timbre of the voice. He knew he'd recognized it from somewhere, a voice he'd heard many times before. Omar Sharif. That was it. An hour and a half later, Vaclav was sitting across from his real estate broker, who looked, in fact, a bit like the great actor and contract bridge champion. Graying mustache and slight paunch, features offset by shining eyes and a suit that whispered effort-free nattiness. When Vaclav arrived, the broker was using a penny to scrape at a scratch-and-win lottery ticket. The only other item on the desk was an empty, stained coffee mug. The dusty office room was finished in faux wood paneling and held several sagging bookshelves, but despite this decrepit retro decor, the broker worked on a sleek, impossibly up-to-date computer that hummed silently as he pulled up the potential listings.
"Now look here,"
said the broker, who, although he hadn't actually introduced himself, had a nameplate on his office door that read John Carwyn. An anglicization or another person? Vaclav couldn't know.
"This is a fine listing, very clean, near your university. I think perfect for you."
"And the price?" asked Vaclav timidly.
$8.75, but there's a nice laundry room in the basement. New machines, I've seen them myself. From Sears, they're very reliable."
"That is a little too expensive for me." John Carwyn gave a little snort.
"What you are asking for, my friend, will cost you money. You cannot sacrifice quality for the sake of money, you know."
"Well," said Vaclav, "I am willing to sacrifice. I'm on a student budget, you see."
"A student budget, yes, I know," said Carwyn. "But most students can't afford to live near the university. That's just the reality of the market these days. That is, unless you're willing to pay a little more than, what was it, 500?
He raised the insides of his eyebrows in a motion of solidarity, then turned his attention back to the computer screen, tapping in a new set of coordinates. Vaclav sat back in the threadbare armchair and watched him work. He felt cheated. John Carwyn's promises had brought him all the way down to this grimy little office, and now the broker was just fleecing him into renting something that was out of his price range. But he wouldn't let Carwyn get him. He wouldn't break down. None of this bullshit will matter, Vaclav thought, if I end up with a place I can afford. He looked up and steeled his gaze at John Carwyn. Here was a haughty capitalist who made sure his clients knew that he was sophisticated. The more Carwyn spoke, the more Vaclav thought of Sharif's portrayal of Yuri in Dr. Zhivago, one of the first movies Vaclav had seen on the big screen. It had been in a repertory theater his father took him to as a child visiting Prague, the movie dubbed into standard Czech. Later, after the revolution, English-language VHS copies of the film became available, and Vaclav, partly nostalgic for the fond memories of the days when he and his father still got along, watched the epic over and over with his classmates, determined to improve his English. Vaclav imagined that he spoke a little bit like Tom Courtenay. The real estate broker was deep in thought.
I might have something here for you, but I'm not sure it's what you want.
Vaclav tried not to look too interested, but inched forward nonetheless.
Let's see, purred Carwyn. It's not technically a one-bedroom, but more of an enlarged studio. A bachelor and a half, as we say in the industry.
He rolled his index finger over the mouse.
Second floor, 10th and Blanca area. That's still a short bus ride from the university.
Not bad at all, thought Vaclav. He waited for the price.
Looks like they want $505.
Triumphant, Vaclav nearly leaped out of his seat. $505? That sounds perfect. John Carwyn swiveled his flat-screen ISO monitor towards Vaclav, revealing 3 digital photos of a pleasant, clean-looking room. The broker was pleased with his handiwork. "Should I see it?" said Vaclav, still exuberant. "I can go whenever they're ready." Carwyn, laconic as always, picked up his office phone and winked at Vaclav.
"I'll call them right now."
A short phone call later, and the euphoria had leached out of the office. "Already promised to someone else?" asked Vaclav. "Why didn't your computer tell you that?"
"Listen, my friend, you needn't be so irate with me, or my office, or my computer system. We take care of the properties, and try to get renters like yourself set up with something nice, but we don't finalize the deal. That's up to the individual landlords. Sometimes they move faster than we do. The woman told me that it all happened just this morning."
Vaclav wondered if it was too late to get his tuition deposit back. He rubbed his eyes for a long time. Maybe he could return to Brno and finally make Zuzana happy, moving out to the countryside to run a chicken farm.
"There is one thing," John Carwyn said, "that I could suggest."
He took a toothpick out of his breast pocket and rolled it in between his teeth.
"I am owed a few, how shall I say it best, favors from some of these landlords, and it may be that the property in question could be negotiated for."
He then picked up a leather-bound Apple Newton digital organizer from his desk and punched the screen with a slim plastic pen. Vaclav looked up with bloodshot eyes. "You can negotiate with them? Isn't that your job anyway?"
"No, as I said, we don't finalize any deals. But if you were willing to help me, I would certainly be willing to help you."
Though Vaclav had learned to enjoy the decadence of post-Soviet culture, he was old enough to remember the bribery and cronyism that once plagued his homeland. He was in no mood to relive the bad old days here in John Carwyn's office, but it didn't seem like he had a choice. If he left now, not only would he be passing up his best chance so far for a suitable apartment, he would have wasted most of a day. He gritted his teeth. "What is it that you want me to do?" John Carwyn smiled under his mustache, and his eyes twinkled slightly more than usual. For the first time during the meeting, he got out of his recliner and walked towards the door.
"Come with me," he said.
Vaclav followed him down the hall past the empty reception desk he had seen on his way in. Carwyn did not turn around to speak to him, but kept on walking.
"You look athletic. Not scrawny like the vast majority of some other young Europeans I've met."
It was true. Vaclav played hockey in Brno for the first 15 years of his life, like most of the men in his family, His cousin had skated alongside a teenage Jaromir Jagr many years back. So, a physical task. That's what lay ahead for him. Probably John Carwyn had a series of new bookshelves he had been planning to install in his office and just needed someone to lug them down the hall. Or maybe he wanted to knock down some drywall. Whatever. It didn't matter. Vaclav would be getting his apartment. They opened a fire door at the end of the hall and descended 2 short flights of concrete stairs. On the floor below, John Carwyn gingerly inserted a key into a steel door at the end of the dark hallway. Vaclav heard a heavy bolt slide open, then followed Carwyn through the open doorway. The room was dim and cold. As Vaclav's eyes adjusted to the darkness, Carwyn threw several switches, and a series of muted red lights hummed to life around the perimeter of the room. They stood in a carpeted, den-like enclosure, not much larger than Carwyn's office, with a fake fireplace set into one wall and an ornate oak desk against another. A large velvet and brass chair sat angled against the desk. A throne, thought Vaclav. There was a large box in the middle of the carpet, covered in a dropcloth. The only other piece of furniture in the room was a tall armoire, standing with its doors closed. It looked like it could house a grandfather clock, or a rack of shotguns. John Carwyn had removed a thin cell phone from his pocket and was speaking in low tones into the mouthpiece. All Vaclav could make out was, "Angel? Yes. 5 minutes. Thank you. My apologies." He snapped the phone shut and turned to face Vaclav. "Young man, you must be wondering what it is that I plan to have you do. You needn't worry. I assure you, not only will this task be relatively painless, but you will likely find it most enjoyable. At least, that has been my experience with the others." No longer was John Carwyn the calm, professional friend playing scratch and wins and drinking coffee as he cruised apartment listings. Now Vaclav began to see in Carwyn something like the look of those snarling, tracksuit-wearing touts who ran the gambling and drug rackets in the cobbled side streets that extended off Wenceslas Square in central Prague. "What is the plan?" Vaclav asked. John Carwyn did not respond, but moved instead to the armoire. He took out his keys again and slid an antique iron key into the lock. He opened the doors for Vaclav. Inside the armoire, lighted by the dull red of the room, was an array of strange equipment. Plastic clothespins, spools of neatly wound rope, several black baseball bats of varying lengths, a small shelf of brightly colored plastic eggs, several bottles of an unknown substance, a feather duster, and a toilet plunger, 3 plastic utensils with handles and hinges, a wallet-sized electrical device from which protruded black and red wires capped in alligator clips, a saddle and bridle decorated with baby blue pom-poms. Vaclav turned to Carwyn. The broker did not offer any consolation. Instead, he reached for a large black camera bag and a titanium tripod. "These are my implements, my friend, my tools, and today you are in luck. You will have the opportunity to utilize them." Vaclav thought about turning for the door right then, but there was something soothing about John Carwyn's voice. If the man said he wasn't going to hurt me, thought Vaclav, he meant it. He felt a terrifying curiosity clawing at him. John Carwyn moved away from the armoire and rested the camera bag on the oak desk. He unzipped it and removed a video camera. "The Sony PD-150. Several years old and arguably out of date, but still delivers a wonderful digital image. You would do well to buy one to document your world travels, my friend. I saw one at an amazingly low price on a net message board recently. It'll make a family visit to the seaside look like $1 million, a real professional production." He opened up the legs of the tripod, secured them with the turn of a wing nut, and slid the camera onto the tripod's mounting pad. He then removed a length of cable and attached one end to the butt of the camera. He stretched the other out to a wall socket beside the desk.
Let me explain how this will work, as I can see you still are unsure about my methodology.
As he spoke, Carwyn adjusted a foam-covered microphone on the end of the camera.
You will star in a short film that I am making. I will be the director, but I may make an appearance on camera as well. Do not worry, I shall protect your identity during the shoot, as I sense that you have figured out the nature of our little production.
He walked back to the armoire and removed what looked like a black leather bag from a hook in the cabinet. He handed it to Vaclav.
You will also wear this as we shoot.
Vaclav turned the item over in his hand. It was a full-face mask with small stitched eye holes cut out of it. A faint musk wafted off the leather. Just then, there was a tap at the door. Carwyn smiled.
Your co-star has arrived.
He opened the door and in walked a young woman about Vaclav's age, lean and muscular, and wearing a wine-red miniskirt and calf-high leather boots. Her white tank top allowed her full-sleeve arm tattoos to breathe. She had several thick-gauge steel earrings in each lobe. She smiled at Carwyn and gave him a half-hug. John Carwyn held out his palm to Vaclav.
Young man, may I present to you Angel?
She stood at arm's length and gripped his fingers in a weak handshake. Vaclav smelled cigarettes and onions on her. Vaclav realized he had never seen a woman like Angel before in person. Dark, angular, exotic. "Are you Oriental?" he asked. "The word's Asian, Jack, and I'm not putting any fucking chopsticks in my hair if that's what you're thinking." She turned to Carwyn. "May I freshen up?" she asked in a liquid voice. John Carwyn gave an approving frown, and Angel, muttering, "Where do you find these idiots?" under her breath, opened a small door Vaclav had not seen before. Inside was a closet-sized powder room, and Angel switched on a light and closed herself in.
"Okay, my friend," said Carwyn. "You may put on your headgear any time. Before we begin, however, may I offer you a drink? I have a very fine scotch in the desk."
Vaclav shook his head. He needed his wits, maybe even his physical faculties too.
"Suit yourself."
Carwyn removed the bottle and poured out a slug.
"Now, I'll explain the fun part of the exercise. You'll notice," he said, turning to the armoire, "that each of my little tools has a number attached to it."
Vaclav looked. It was true.
"Next, what I have over here," said Carwyn, picking up a tennis ball-sized item from the desk, "is a 20-sided die, made from the bone of a Mongolian ox. Very rare, very durable."
Vaclav had been a Dungeons & Dragons player as a young man. He needed no initiation to this type of game piece.
"When I roll a certain number, I will call it out. You, my friend, must then pick out the corresponding implement from the Closet of Wonders and utilize it according to my instructions. Do you understand?"
Vaclav nodded slowly. A scene flashed through his mind. Age 12, flushed in the cheek from hockey practice, rushing home to pull out the D&D game book and plot his next series of moves. None of his hockey teammates knew about his fantasy obsession. There he'd sit on the shag rug in his bedroom, the snow on his skates still melting in the concrete entryway of his apartment block, as he acted out feats of daring and magic. Here, back in John Carwyn's twisted world, he was no longer the dungeon master. He'd have to follow Carwyn's directions if he wanted his apartment. Carwyn switched on the camera. The powder room door opened, and Angel stepped out, topless. Carwyn looked to Vaclav.
"Now, take off your shirt and put on the hood."
In that moment, Vaclav saw with great clarity the string of events leading to this moment, moving in reverse through his university studies and Zhou dynasty history, his interest in medieval and ancient cultures as a teenager, the fantasy board games that his father despised as a stupid Western waste of time, the knee injury that killed his father's dream of Vaclav becoming a professional athlete and elevating the family out of their dreary communist existence. On the ice he had trained hard every morning, often to the point of retching, though it still hadn't been enough for his father. Only the injury had saved him, had allowed him to say no. "No," said Vaclav. Carwyn looked up from the camera. Angel's expression didn't change.
"Perhaps you didn't hear me, young man. Get ready to shoot."
"No, I will not do this." Vaclav hated the sound of his Czech accent, but he said the words louder than usual. He looked at Angel. "This is not right for you either." "Hey, sweetie, I got bills to pay," she said.
"Who the fuck do you think you're dealing with here?" boomed Carwyn.
November 1997. Rain streaked down the concrete walls of the apartment complex, creating dark gray swaths across the building's facade. Vaclav was warm inside, sitting on an old soft couch under the glow of a yellow floor lamp. The other day, a UBC classmate had told him that last year a snowstorm had crippled the city, and the army was called out. Vaclav wondered if this happened every year in Canada, and how people here responded to calling out the army. Zuzana wanted him to visit for Christmas. Vaclav had refused. With the economic troubles back home, the Czech koruna had plunged. A dozen travel agencies had collapsed, and flights were now even harder to come by. What's more, he'd seen on the local news that thousands of Czech Roma were scrambling to get over to Canada to escape persecution at home. Vaclav had gotten out just in time. He wasn't going anywhere. Zuzana cried for 10 minutes, and he said he didn't love her. After hanging up, he realized this should have happened many months and many miles ago. The apartment was far from perfect. The windows were old and leaked when the wind blew, and the bus ride to the university required 2 transfers. School was taking up more time than he realized. One day last week, he'd run into Angel in a guitar store near the university. It had been awkward at first, but the encounter ended with her telling him her real name. He'd asked her for coffee, and she'd snorted no, but that maybe a beer might happen if he could prove that he wasn't a cheesy Eurotrash dickbag. She gave him her pager number. Vaclav remembered that his laundry was probably done. The building's washing machine might not have been the fancy new one from Sears that John Carwyn had championed, but it did the trick. He headed down to the basement, the voice of Dr. Zhivago resonating in his head.